Hello YouTubies! I've just finished another project. Here it is. I was inspired recently to start playing with some of these model cars. You might have seen I've got a load of them in the back there. Always been in love with the idea of having a scale model of my own car. If any of you have watched any of the videos on the channel before, you would have seen my car is not stock looking, certainly. Always like the idea of having a scale model, so I thought, oh, that will be a fun project. A little project. I can use some things I've learned from restoring a motorcycle earlier in the year, particularly around painting and things like that. And it didn't go as well as I would have liked, so I'm considering this a prototype. I've learnt some things along the way, so not a total loss. I do have something to show for it at the end. And this was the weirdest little big project I've ever done. I haven't tidied up yet. Insane amount of stuff needed to make such a titchy thing. But I'll show you how we did it, what we went through, and at the end show you the end results, what I wasn't happy with, what went wrong, that sort of stuff. Love it if it would inspire anyone to have a go at doing something themselves. I will be doing more of these. I've already got an idea for the next one I want to do, taking into account the things I learned this time. So stick around, enjoy, comment if you like it. Any tips anyone's got on how they might have done some of the bits I did badly or wrong, I would love to hear them, because it's a bit different than working on a real car. You got to do everything miniature, everything's fine, everything's difficult. Yeah, enjoy. So this is my car. This is what I'm trying to recreate. I want to work on the lights. I want to get the spoiler in, and we'll pay attention to the front bumper. First, safely jack up your car, as always, with every job you ever do. So this is what we're working with. This is a 1:24 scale Boxster model. This is the pre-facelift version. My car is the facelift. We'll come to that later. I've already undone the screws on it. This is what we're looking at on the inside, and effectively the first stage is really, because I need to paint it and whatnot, start taking it apart. I'll just give you a look at what we're playing with here. Attention also be paid to the headlights because they are not the same as mine. And here it is with the underneath. Ultimately need to start removing all of these plastic pieces. Some of them just come off, some of them are on the tabs, which I'll show you very shortly, and we need to get it down to just the metal parts so that we can work on painting, because even though it looks like it is, it might not, it's not quite the right color, and we just need to pop off all of these plastic pieces. And here it is, effectively naked, no plastic on it. These are just the last of the metal pieces. Now, one of the things on the body I need to pay attention to, where my finger is now, there are some slightly different, I don't know what you'd call them, wings or lumps on the facelift model that we need to add on. So, using some plastic body, after sanding it down, using some plastic body filler, I just raised out that area in order to have a material that I could sand and grind or whatever it would need to be down into the sort of shapes. So I put that on, let that cure overnight, and then it was time to start getting that shape ready. Here we are after much sanding and sculpting on a very miniature scale. You can kind of see what we're going for here. This isn't quite the finished product, but I was pretty happy with how this was getting on, so carried on. And I thought, let me just experiment. Can I paint it as is? And the answer was no. So it would need to probably be stripped, primed, and painted at least semi-correctly. So, in order to do that, I thought, let me scuff it up nice and good, starting with a more coarse sandpaper and moving finer and finer, much like you might do painting car body work. Thankfully, not showing you this in the actual normal speed, and hoped that this would mean the paint would stick to it. And this was, whilst a rectifiable one, the first of a few mistakes I made doing this project. With the doors now removed, here's all the pieces that were metal that needed painting, sanded down the first time. As I mentioned, did make a little mistake with this, which I'll come to in just a second. I found a small hole, which there must have been a bubble in the filler that I used, or the bumper material that I used, so I had to fill this in with some modelling putty. I luckily had access to some of this because my brother has recently been doing some air fix. It's something we always used to do as kids, so filled it in and left that to dry before then sanding it. And I'll tell you here, the sanding and then the first coat of primer did not work. I had to use a paint remover to then get it all back down to the bare metal and start again. You're going to see very, very shortly why I had to do that. Here's the first primer, and you can see it's shiny. Shouldn't really be shiny, it wants to be a bit matte so the paint will take to it. I used a cheap one, that was my mistake, so got it stripped off and then I did it again. You'll notice the heater in the corner there. Now, I left it too close as well, so this also needed to be sanded down, but it all got removed. As mentioned earlier, my lights are clear. These ones had orange on, so I had to sand off the orange layer on those lights. And then here's the next problem. I found some wheels that were the best I could for a model size of the actual wheels that I had, and they do not fit the model. And this is where the biggest mistake that I did doing this came. I thought simply I could make these gaps a bit larger because they needed to. As you can see, the wheels do not fit, so I ground them out to fit them. And here's the result. The wheels now fit, but as you can probably tell, those holes are too big. I might have got away with it if the wheels weren't so big. To make the spoiler, I couldn't find one online, so I got a piece of sort of ABS plastic or something, cut out the bits and glued together a spoiler, which actually I was quite happy with. The wheels came with some calipers to paint, and then the doors started getting painted, but I had the same problem. They also had to be stripped. Once I'd gone through the stripping and then repainting of colour, it was a case of just going to add on some clear coat. Did 3 or 4 layers of this just to make it extra shiny. Then I went into experimentation mode. I wanted to add the lights to it. I tried to do this to some model cars when I was younger and failed. And the biggest challenge I was going to have was being able to fit the battery. I tried doing some experiments with smaller batteries, but ultimately this area needed to be ground down because the 9-volt was the only thing that seemed to get the 3 bulbs I wanted to use to power. And here you can see a load of experiments basically happening where I took apart pieces of like an old broken torch. I wanted to get a switch on this, and I like to experiment with this stuff. I don't get all of the electronics in the world, but I am quite happy to have a go. So I rigged up some dummy test rigs, if you like, and just worked out, right, the 9-volt battery, this will give me power to 3 lights. So I can have one each side and one at the front. And then came the job of painstakingly laying them out where they're going to go, make sure they're not going to impact any of the other parts, solder on the wires, and you can see I've used heat shrinking where possible as well, and trying to make it fit nice and low profile because I had a channel down the middle between the seats to use. Here's the car with the colours applied. I set it up on this box so I could pick it up and move it around as I liked. Now the side indicators on my car are also clear or grey looking, so I borrowed some grey model paint to just paint those in, and I thought it was pretty brave of me to do it on video, but actually I did a pretty shocking job. So another very small mistake could be rectified. By this stage I was like, let me do the best I can with what I've got and see how it turns out ultimately. But a little dash of grey just put on there, and I lied to you slightly because this part was before I went and put on the clear coat, and I was happy enough with that for the time I was doing it. This is what the electronic part underneath looks like. So you can see where I've glued down the wires with a hot glue gun. I've put in the receptor for the battery, and I've wired it to a switch after testing it would work. The switch was able to get away with being in the back there, and this is the amount of stuff I ended up having out while I was doing this project. Very rarely have this much stuff out for any of them. Here's the car with the new clear lights on it and starting to look like a car again. This project took over 2 weeks, and it was nice seeing it come back together. I painted the calipers yellow using the exact same paint that I used for my actual calipers, which possibly was a slight mistake because it takes forever to cure and dry, and then I needed to sort of reassemble the base ready to ultimately start putting it back together. I tested multiple times that things like the batteries and the lights would fit without impacting the interior parts. But these new larger wheels, frankly, were the biggest issue. I couldn't think of a way to make any that looked like mine. I didn't want to ignore them and just use the turbo twist style ones that came with it. And so I was putting it back together multiple times, check everything fits, see how it fits. And ultimately, I did not like how the car sits. The wheels are too big. They're probably more appropriate for something slightly smaller than a 118 scale, even though these were apparently for a 124. There were some bits I had to cut out of the base to make some clearance for them as well, but lesson learnt for next time if I'm going to do it again, which I'm sure I will. As I say, this one's the prototype. I will go for a larger model and build it into that. It will also make me have less issue with sort of trying to package in the battery and the lights and all of those pieces. But ultimately, this is effectively what the base looks like. Something that I needed to do, certainly for the front wheels, the back wheels had this retaining piece which helped keep the axle between them low, which was required for the top of the wheels, these super large wheels, to not touch and rub on the body of the car itself. I actually had to drill out slightly the base so that they could sit slightly lower. At the front, I actually needed to do something about the same problem, but there's no retainer. What I ended up doing was just getting a tiny piece of a cable tie, using the soldering iron to just kind of melt that across the bar at the top, that actually like the cradle, if you like, that the wheel's axle sits in. And this solved that problem. But here you can see me just tying in the wires into the edge of this brace at the back, because I need to be able to make sure they're going to stay clear of the wheels when it's put back together, and they'll be able to roll freely. The next part of the process was relatively simple. It's put all of the plastic trimming pieces back in that were there. I actually thought I might need to slightly melt some of these to get them to stick back in, but actually they fit quite nicely. They probably would have been okay, but a tiny dab of glue in the ones that needed to was just peace of mind that they're not just going to fall apart, and the minute I turn it over, just drop off. Especially after the amount of work I put into this. I don't want, if the wheels are spinning, them to grab bits of it if I was to be rolling it or anything. So just trying to do a good job. So I ran through, reconnected all of those. This is the pieces I mentioned with the cable tie. There was just tiny little braces just melted on, just to be able to stop the wheels from coming up, because every time you put it down, they would. And here's the finished result, as it were. You can see it sits a little bit too highly, but I'm not crazily unhappy with it. Did make a few mistakes, but quite happy overall for my first go. The lights work. Learned enough lessons that for the next one I do, because I definitely will do one of these again. I've already got one in mind, as I say. I would do things differently, and I probably would start with a larger scale model, because the amount of wheels available just for starters for the 118s is significantly greater, and you've got a lot more room to play with. The major struggle was that everything was so tiny. And there we are. That's what I went through, what I needed to do, what I didn't do so well. As I say, already got another one. It's up there. Maybe you saw it in the video, maybe you didn't. But what I would like to do would be also do some more of these for with people who have got interesting custom looking cars. So you can't just buy a model of it, it needs to be made. If you've got anything that's interesting looking and you want to message me about it, drop it in the comments. Reach out. They can reach me. Maybe Instagram might be easiest, at Granty's Garage. I'd love to be able to do another one of these in the very near future for another car, and I'll pick one of the ones people hopefully will contribute and sort of ask for some extra pictures and stuff like that, and some information on the car. And yeah, that would be great fun. So let us know if you want me to make a custom model of your car next, and I'll maybe try and do a better job than this one. If you like the video, please give it a like and subscribe. You know how it helps out. You know the drill. Follow us on Instagram at Granty's Garage. We're on TikTok now at the same tag. I'll be honest, I still don't know what TikTok is, what it's for, but we're there. And we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.